They humiliated me in front of everyone, not knowing I had the proof that would bring them down. The room fell silent at the exact moment Marina Kovac realized this wasn't just another family dinner. It was a trial. Her aunt was the first to laugh. Her cousin pushed his chair back as if wanting distance, and her father, without even looking at her, said loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "She was never part of this." The words echoed like a final seal. Someone applauded. Another filmed. Marina didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't try to explain herself. She just closed her purse with too much care for someone who had just been humiliated in front of everyone. What no one at that table knew is that Marina wasn't there to be accepted. She was there to confirm something. And inside that purse, silent and forgotten under the table, was the document the entire family believed no longer existed. Their mistake wasn't humiliating her. It was doing it before knowing what she had kept. Throughout her entire life, Marina Kovac learned to survive without space. In the family, she was the one who didn't cause problems, the one who listened more than she spoke, the one always left for later. While others competed for inheritances, positions, and favors, Marina observed in silence. What seemed like weakness was, in fact, memory. Every interrupted conversation, every rushed signature, every secret whispered thinking she wasn't listening. In this story, you'll follow how a woman erased by her own family transforms silence into proof and public humiliation into the beginning of a fall no one could prevent. Before we continue, comment below. What city or country are you watching from? This story has crossed borders and perhaps touches something you've also lived through. Now, let's go back to the moment Marina understood she no longer needed to defend herself. Marina's earliest memory wasn't of love. It was of comparison. She must have been 5, maybe 6, standing in the hallway of her grandmother's house while the adults gathered in the dining room. Through the crack in the door, she could see them all, aunts, uncles, cousins, laughing around the mahogany table that seemed to hold the weight of every family decision ever made. Her cousin Brandon was showing off his report card. Straight A's. The room erupted in applause. Her uncle Richard lifted him onto his shoulders. Her grandmother clasped her hands together, like she was witnessing a miracle. Marina held her own report card against her chest. Also, straight A's. Also worth celebrating. But when she stepped into the doorway, no one turned. Her Aunt Patricia saw her first and smiled. That thin, polite smile adults use when they've already decided you're not important enough to interrupt the moment for. "Not now, sweetheart. We're busy." Marina stepped back into the hallway. That night she learned the first rule of the Kovac family. Presence didn't equal visibility. Years passed, and the pattern deepened. Brandon got the college fund. Marina got told to find scholarships. Her brother Ethan got the car for his 16th birthday. Marina got a bus pass and a lecture about responsibility. When family photos were taken, she was always positioned at the edge. Easy to crop out, easier to forget. Her father, Thomas Kovac, ran the family real estate business with the efficiency of a man who believed emotions were distractions. To him, Marina was a disappointment he never voiced, but always implied. She wasn't aggressive enough, wasn't ambitious, wasn't like Ethan, who had inherited Thomas's sharp edges and taste for control. Her mother, Claire, had once tried to advocate for her. Once. After that, she learned that keeping peace with Thomas meant sacrificing fairness with Marina. So Claire stopped trying, and Marina stopped expecting. The family operated on an unspoken hierarchy. At the top, Thomas, the patriarch, the decision-maker, the man whose word was law. Below him, Ethan, the heir apparent, groomed since childhood to take over the business. Confident, cruel in subtle ways, always one step ahead in the game of family favor. Then came the extended family, Richard, Patricia, and their perfect children. They circled Thomas like planets around the sun, always angling for investment opportunities, endorsements, or a bigger slice of inheritance when the time came. And at the bottom, invisible unless needed for appearances, Marina. She was invited to events only when her absence would look bad. She was mentioned in conversations only when someone needed an example of what not to be. Marina's too soft. Marina doesn't have the drive. Marina's always been different. Different meant expendable. But Marina had something no one in that family understood. Patience. While they fought for the spotlight, she learned to live in the shadows. While they spoke over each other, she listened. While they made careless mistakes in their arrogance, she remembered every single one. At 12, she started keeping a journal, Not the kind where you write about feelings or crushes, a record, dates, conversations, promises made and broken. She didn't know why she did it at first. It just felt like the only thing she could control. The act of witnessing, of keeping track, of making sure someone remembered the truth, even if no one else cared. 1. Thanksgiving, when Marina was 14, the family gathered at the estate for dinner. Ethan was 17 and had just gotten accepted to an Ivy League school. The whole night was a celebration of him. Thomas gave a speech. Patricia cried. Even the cousins toasted with sparkling cider. Marina sat at the far end of the table, next to her grandmother's nurse. Halfway through dessert, Patricia turned to her with that same thin smile. "And Marina, sweetie, what are your plans? I assume you're figuring things out?" The table went quiet. Marina felt every eye on her, not with curiosity, but with preemptive judgment. She could have said she had plans. She could have mentioned her grades, her essay that won an award, the college she'd been researching on her own because no one offered to help. Instead, she said, "I'm still thinking." Patricia nodded slowly, knowingly. "Well, that's honest." Ethan smirked into his napkin. Thomas didn't even look up. And that was the moment Marina realized. They had already decided she didn't matter. No amount of trying would change it. No amount of proving herself would earn their respect. So she stopped trying to earn anything. And she started watching. Because in a family like the Kovacs, where power was everything and loyalty was currency, the ones who talked the loudest were often the ones hiding the most. And Marina was no longer interested in being heard. She was interested in knowing. And one day she would know more than all of them combined. The night Marina turned 18, her father called her into his office. She thought he might wish her happy birthday. Instead, he handed her a document and told her to sign. "It's just a formality," he said. "Nothing you need to read." Marina took the paper, and for the first time in her life, she read every single word. Thomas Kovac's office smelled like leather and old wood, the kind of smell that was supposed to communicate power, legacy, control. Marina stood in the doorway holding the paper he'd given her, scanning the dense legal language that covered the page. Her 18th birthday had been 3 hours ago. No cake, no song. Just this. "It's a family trust document," Thomas said, not looking up from his computer. "Standard procedure. Everyone signs when they turn 18. Marina's eyes caught on a phrase buried halfway down the page. "Hereby relinquishes all claim to inheritance, property distribution, and decision-making authority within the Kovacs family estate." She read it again, then a third time. "This says I'm giving up my inheritance." Thomas finally looked at her. His expression didn't change. "You were never going to manage it anyway, Marina. This way, things stay clean. Ethan will handle everything when the time comes. But I'm your daughter, and you'll be taken care of. That's what family does." He gestured toward the desk. "Sign it. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. Marina felt the air press against her chest. She wanted to scream, to throw the paper at him, to demand why Ethan never had to sign away his rights, why Brandon and the cousins were still in the will, why she was the only one being erased. But she had learned, over 18 years, that asking for fairness in this family only gave them another reason to call her weak. So instead she said, "I need to read it first." Thomas's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to read. It's a formality. Then you won't mind if I take it to my room." A pause. Then a cold smile. "Fine. Bring it back signed tomorrow." Marina nodded and left. She didn't sign it tomorrow or the day after. She never signed it at all. What Thomas didn't know, what no one in that family ever knew, was that Marina had learned something crucial in that moment. They only rush you when they're hiding something. So she started looking for what they were hiding. It started small. Marina began staying up late, searching public records online. Property transfers, business filings, tax documents, anything tied to the Kovacs name. She found inconsistencies. Ethan's name appeared on property deeds he was too young to legally hold. Patricia and Richard were listed as board members of a subsidiary company that, according to state records, didn't file taxes for 2 years. Her father's signature appeared on loan documents dated 6 months after her mother had been hospitalized for exhaustion, documents Claire swore she never saw. None of it was proof of a crime, but all of it was proof of carelessness. They were so confident in their control that they stopped checking their own work, and Marina kept a record of every single mistake. The next time the family gathered, it was for her grandmother's birthday. Everyone was there. The estate was decorated. The champagne flowed. Marina stood near the fireplace, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching. Ethan was in the corner, talking to a lawyer. Their conversation was low, but Marina was close enough to hear fragments. The offshore accounts are fine. No one checks those. As long as the signature matches, it doesn't matter who actually. She's not going to ask questions. She never does. Marina's hand tightened around her glass. They were talking about Claire, her mother. Across the room, Claire sat in a chair by the window, smiling at nothing. She'd been on anxiety medication for 2 years. The family called it a rough patch. Marina called it what it was, surrender. Her mother had once fought for her, once stood up to Thomas, once tried to make sure Marina was seen. But that version of Claire was gone now, replaced by someone who floated through family gatherings like a ghost in her own life. And Marina realized, watching her mother smile vacantly at Patricia's fake compliments, that this was the fate of women in the Kovacs family who dared to ask questions. They medicated you, isolated you, erased you slowly, so no one noticed until it was too late. Marina didn't go to her father that night, didn't confront Ethan, didn't try to fix anything. Instead, she went home, opened her laptop, and started a new folder. She labeled it Kovacs, Evidence, and she made herself a promise. She would never ask them for anything again. Not fairness, not honesty, not love, because asking gave them power. But knowing gave her everything. Over the next 2 years, Marina worked 2 jobs while attending community college. She saved every dollar. She lived in a small apartment on the edge of town. She stopped going to family dinners unless absolutely necessary. When she did show up, she was polite, quiet, forgettable, exactly what they expected. What they didn't see was the scanner in her bag, the recording app on her phone, the photographic memory she'd sharpened into a weapon, every careless comment, every unsigned contract left on a desk, every toast made in overconfidence, where someone said just a little too much after their 3rd drink. Marina collected it all. One night, Ethan called her. It was late. He was drunk. "You know, you're lucky," he slurred. "You got out early. You don't have to deal with all this pressure. Dad's on my ass about everything. The business, the properties, the—" He stopped himself. "Never mind." "The what?" Marina asked carefully. Ethan laughed. "Nothing you'd understand. You were always better at staying out of it. Maybe." "Hey, Marina. Yeah? You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd been more like me?" She paused. "No." "Good, because you wouldn't have survived it." He hung up. Marina sat in the dark of her apartment staring at her phone. And she thought, "You're right, Ethan. I wouldn't have survived being like you, but I survived being invisible. And that's the part you'll never understand." 3 years later, Marina received a letter. It was from a law firm she didn't recognize, addressed to her directly. Inside was a single document, a copy of something that had been filed 5 years ago when she was still a teenager. Her name was on it. Her forged signature was on it. And the moment she saw it, she understood exactly what her family had done. The letter came on a Tuesday. Marina was 21, working the closing shift at a bookstore when she checked her mailbox and saw the return address, Whitmore and Associates, attorneys at law. She didn't recognize the name. She opened it standing in the hallway. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document, stamped and notarized, dated 5 years prior, 3 months after her 18th birthday. At the top, in bold, Transfer of Beneficiary Rights, Kovacs Family Trust, and at the bottom, in blue ink, her signature. Except it wasn't her signature. It was close. Someone had practiced. But the capital M was wrong. The tail on the A looped the opposite direction. Marina had never signed this document, but according to the state, she had. Her hands shook as she read the attached note, handwritten on firm letterhead, "Ms. Kovacs. This was filed as part of a routine estate audit we're conducting for a separate client. Your name appeared in cross-reference documents, and we're required by law to notify all affected parties. If you did not authorize this transfer, you may wish to consult independent legal counsel. Whitmore and Associates does not represent you, and this is not legal advice." Marina read it 3 times. Then she walked back to her apartment, locked the door, and sat at her desk. She pulled out the folder she'd been building for years, and she finally understood what she was looking at. The document was a transfer of beneficiary rights, meaning someone had legally removed Marina from any claim to the family trust, the properties, the business holdings, everything. It had been filed when she was 18, which meant someone had forged her signature right around the time her father handed her that first document in his office. the one she refused to sign. They didn't wait for her cooperation. They just erased her anyway. Marina opened her laptop and pulled up the original trust documents she'd found years ago in a public records search. There it was, the Kovacs Family Revocable Trust, established by her grandmother decades ago, naming Thomas as trustee and listing all grandchildren as beneficiaries upon reaching adulthood. Marina's name was on the original trust, but in the updated version filed 5 years ago, her name had been crossed out, replaced with all rights transferred to Ethan Kovacs, pursuant to signed relinquishment, attached. The attached document was the one in her hands, the one she never signed. She sat back, her mind racing. This wasn't just exclusion, this was fraud. Forging someone's signature on a legal document was a crime, especially when it involved the transfer of assets worth millions. But here's what Marina understood that most people wouldn't. They got away with it because no one thought she'd ever check. She was the invisible one, the one who didn't ask questions, the one who'd already accepted her place at the bottom of the family hierarchy. Why would she suddenly demand to see legal paperwork? Why would she hire a lawyer? Why would she even know her rights? They gambled on her ignorance, and for 5 years, it worked. But now Marina had the one thing they never expected her to have: proof. She made 3 calls that night. The first was to a handwriting analyst. The second was to a lawyer who specialized in estate fraud. The third was to a private investigator who'd worked with victims of financial abuse. Within 2 weeks, she had confirmation. The signature was forged. The notary who witnessed it had been paid off and later disbarred for unrelated fraud. The document had been filed during a narrow window when her grandmother was in hospice care and unable to oversee the trust's administration. It was clean, professional, almost foolproof. Almost. The lawyer, a woman named Angela Reyes, sat across from Marina in a small office that smelled like coffee and paper. "You have a case," Angela said, "a strong one. But I need you to understand what you're up against. My family, your family's money, their reputation, their legal team." Angela leaned forward. "They'll say you're lying, that you signed it and forgot, that you're bitter and jealous. They'll try to paint you as unstable, vindictive, or worse." Marina didn't blink. "Let them." Angela studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Okay, so what do you want to do?" Marina thought about it. She could file a lawsuit immediately, expose them, burn it all down in public, or she could wait until they felt safe, until they made another mistake, until they gave her even more evidence. "I want to wait," Marina said. Angela raised an eyebrow. "Wait for what?" "For them to do it again." Because Marina understood something fundamental about people like her family. They don't stop when they get away with it once. They get bolder, sloppier, more confident that no one's watching. And Marina was very, very good at watching. Over the next 3 years, Marina built a life they didn't see. She finished her degree, got a job in forensic accounting, learned how to track money the way wolves track scent, and one day she got a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. It was her aunt, Patricia. "Marina, darling." Patricia's voice dripped with false warmth. "We're having a family dinner next month. Your father thought it would be nice if you came." Marina closed her eyes. She knew exactly what this was. "I'll be there," she said, and for the first time in years, she smiled. Marina's life, to anyone watching, was unremarkable. She graduated with a degree in accounting, took a job at a mid-sized firm specializing in forensic audits, rented a modest apartment in a neighborhood where no one from the Kovacs family would ever think to visit. She didn't post on social media, didn't attend family events unless explicitly summoned, didn't make waves. To her father, she was proof that low expectations had been correct. To Ethan, she was forgettable. To Patricia and Richard, she was the cautionary tale they told their own children. See what happens when you don't fight for your place? But what none of them knew was that Marina's silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. Her job gave her access to tools most people never see. Software that traced financial transactions across decades, databases that cross-referenced property records, shell companies and tax filings, contacts in legal offices who owed her favors for past audits. And Marina used every single one. At night after work, she would come home and pull up the Kovacs family files she'd been building since she was 18. She had the forged signature document, now verified by 3 independent handwriting analysts, bank statements showing suspicious transfers between Thomas's personal accounts and offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands, Property deeds listing Ethan as the sole owner of assets that were legally supposed to be held in trust for all beneficiaries. Email exchanges she'd found on an old laptop Ethan had thrown away, where he and Patricia discussed keeping Marina out of the loop and making sure the transfer goes through before she understands what it means. Recorded phone calls, legal in her state with one-party consent, where Richard admitted to falsifying tax documents to reduce the estate's reported value. It was a mountain of evidence, and Marina organized it like a prosecutor preparing for trial. She had no illusions about what this was. This wasn't about justice in the abstract. It wasn't about fairness or karma. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen. Her name, her rights, her share of a legacy that was as much hers as anyone else's. But more than that, it was about making sure they couldn't do this to anyone else. Because Marina knew the truth about families like hers. They don't just hurt you. They teach you that being hurt is normal, and she refused to let that lesson stand. 3 years into her silence, Marina started preparing for Endgame. She opened a secure cloud account and uploaded copies of every document. She sent encrypted backups to Angela Reyes, her lawyer. She wrote a detailed timeline of events, cross-referenced with evidence, and stored it in 3 separate locations. She wasn't being paranoid. She was being thorough, because she knew that when she finally acted, her family would come at her with everything they had, and she needed to be ready. One Sunday afternoon, Marina was reviewing her files when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then, instinct told her to pick up. "Hello? Marina?" Patricia's voice was bright, cheerful, false. "It's your Aunt Patricia. How are you, sweetheart?" Marina's stomach tightened. Patricia hadn't called her in 4 years. "I'm fine. What's going on?" "Well, we're having a family dinner next month. You know, just a little get-together at the estate. Your father thought it would be wonderful if you joined us. It's been so long since we've all been together." Marina's mind raced. A family dinner at the estate after years of radio silence. This wasn't a reunion. This was something else. "What's the occasion?" Marina asked carefully. "Oh, no occasion. Just family. You know how your father is, and he's getting older, and he wants everyone together. I think he's feeling sentimental." Thomas Kovacs didn't have a sentimental bone in his body. "Okay," Marina said. "I'll be there." "Wonderful. I'll send you the details." "And Marina?" "Yes? It'll be so good to see you." Patricia hung up. Marina sat in silence, staring at her phone. She called Angela the next morning. "They're planning something," Marina said. "How do you know?" "Because they invited me." Angela was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they know about the investigation, the evidence?" "No." Marina shook her head, even though Angela couldn't see her. "If they knew, they'd come at me directly. This is something else." "Then what?" Marina thought about it. About the timing. About the way Patricia's voice had sounded just a little too casual, a little too rehearsed. "They're closing ranks," Marina said. "Whatever they're planning, they want witnesses. They want it to look legitimate. So what do you do?" Marina smiled, cold and certain. "I go, I watch, and I wait for them to hand me exactly what I need." Over the next month, Marina prepared. She bought a small recording device, no bigger than a pen, that could capture audio for up to 6 hours. She reviewed her evidence files until she could recite every detail from memory. She rehearsed staying calm, staying quiet, letting them think she was still the same invisible girl they'd always dismissed. She also did something she hadn't done in years. She bought a dress. Not expensive, not flashy, just something that made her look put together, professional, like someone who had her life under control, because she needed them to underestimate her one last time. The night before the dinner, Marina sat in her apartment and wrote a letter. Not to her family, to herself. If you're reading this, it means you survived what comes next. Remember, you didn't start this. You didn't choose to be erased. You didn't ask to be invisible, but you chose to fight back. And that's the part they'll never take from you. She folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and placed it in her desk drawer. Then she packed her bag. Inside, along with her wallet and keys, she placed the recording device, a printed copy of the forged signature document, a USB drive containing every piece of evidence she'd collected. And one more thing, a handwritten note addressed to her father that she would only use if absolutely necessary. It said, "I know what you did, and now so will everyone else." Marina arrived at the estate at exactly 6 p.m. The driveway was full of cars. The lights were on in every window. She sat in her car for a moment, breathing slowly, steadying herself. Then she picked up her bag, checked that the recording device was on, and stepped out into the cold night air. As she walked toward the front door, she saw them through the window. Her father, Ethan, Patricia, Richard, the cousins, even her mother, sitting quietly in the corner. They were all waiting. And Marina realized with absolute clarity, this wasn't a dinner. It was a trap. Good. She'd brought one too. The Kovacs estate looked exactly as Marina remembered. Imposing. Cold. The kind of house that was built to intimidate rather than welcome. She stood at the front door, her hand hovering over the doorbell, and allowed herself one last moment of doubt. She could turn around, get back in her car, disappear from their lives forever, let them have their money, their lies, their false legacy. But then she thought about the forged signature, about her mother's vacant smile, about every young woman who would come after her in this family, who would be told she didn't matter, who would be erased with the same casual cruelty. Marina pressed the doorbell. Patricia answered, arms wide, smile blinding. "Marina, oh, you look wonderful." She pulled Marina into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and felt like a performance. Come in, come in. Everyone's so excited to see you." Marina stepped inside. The foyer was exactly as she remembered. Marble floors, a chandelier that cost more than most people's homes, family portraits lining the walls. Except now, Marina noticed something she'd never paid attention to before. Her portrait wasn't there. Every other grandchild had one, even the cousins who barely visited, but not her. She'd been erased before she ever realized she was being written out. "Everyone's in the dining room," Patricia said, guiding Marina forward with a hand on her shoulder that felt more like a grip than a gesture. "Your father wanted this to be special." They entered the dining room, and conversation stopped. Thomas sat at the head of the table, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, looking like a king at court. Ethan was to his right, leaning back in his chair with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Richard and the cousins occupied the middle seats. Claire sat near the end, hands folded in her lap, staring at her plate. And at the far end of the table, one empty chair. For Marina. "Marina," Thomas's voice was flat, controlled. "You're late." She glanced at her watch. "I'm exactly on time." "Sit." She did, placing her bag carefully on the floor beside her chair, making sure the recording device inside was still running. Around the table, eyes followed her. Not with warmth, with assessment. Patricia poured wine. Richard asked bland questions about her job. The cousins made small talk that barely disguised their disinterest, and through it all, Marina smiled politely and said very little, because she'd learned years ago that silence made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people made mistakes. Dinner was served, expensive cuts of meat, roasted vegetables, wine that cost more per bottle than Marina made in a week. Ethan barely looked at her. Claire didn't look at anyone. And Thomas watched Marina the way a hawk watches a field mouse. Finally, as dessert was being cleared, Patricia stood and tapped her glass with a fork. "I'd like to say a few words," she announced, her voice taking on that practiced public speaking tone. "It's so rare that we're all together like this, and I think it's important to acknowledge what this family means." Marina's pulse quickened. "Here it comes. Thomas has built something extraordinary," Patricia continued. "A legacy, a business, a family name that means something in this town. And as we look toward the future, it's important that we all understand our roles in protecting that legacy." She looked directly at Marina. "Some of us are called to lead, some of us are called to support, and some of us," Patricia paused, her smile thin and sharp, "some of us are better off stepping aside so that those who are capable can do what needs to be done." The table was silent. Marina felt her mother's eyes on her, but Claire said nothing. Ethan smirked into his wine glass, and Thomas leaned back, arms crossed, waiting. "Which brings me to why we're all here tonight," Patricia said. "Thomas has made some decisions about the estate, about the business, about the future, and he wanted to make sure everyone understood them, together as a family." She gestured to Thomas. He stood slowly, commanding the room without effort. "I'm not getting any younger," Thomas said, "and I need to make sure everything is in order. The business, the properties, the trust, all of it. So I've been working with our legal team to finalize the succession plan." He pulled out a document from the folder beside his plate. "This is the updated family trust agreement. It names Ethan as sole trustee and primary beneficiary. Richard and Patricia will serve as advisors. The cousins will receive distributions as outlined." He paused. "Marina is not included." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marina didn't move. "This isn't personal," Thomas continued, his tone matter-of-fact. It's practical. You've never shown interest in the business. You've distanced yourself from the family, and frankly, you don't have the capacity to manage this kind of responsibility. He slid the document across the table toward her. I wanted you here so you could hear it directly, so there's no confusion later, no misunderstandings. Marina looked down at the document, then up at her father. You wanted me here as a witness, she said quietly. Thomas's expression didn't change. I wanted you here so you'd understand. Understand what? That you were never part of this. The room went silent. Patricia set down her glass, eyes gleaming. Ethan leaned forward, barely hiding his satisfaction. Richard looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. And Claire, Marina's mother, finally looked up. Her eyes were wet, but her mouth stayed closed. Marina felt it then. The weight of every dismissal, every comparison, every time she'd been told she wasn't enough. But instead of breaking her, it crystallized something. Clarity. She reached down and picked up her bag. Thank you for dinner, she said, standing. Patricia's eyes widened. Marina, don't be dramatic. I'm not. Marina's voice was calm, steady. You invited me here to witness my own erasure. I witnessed it. Now I'm leaving. Thomas's jaw tightened. Sit down. No. The word landed like a door slamming. For the first time in her life, Marina had said no to her father, and meant it. She walked toward the door, bag in hand, aware of every eye tracking her movement. Marina. She stopped, turned. Thomas was standing now, his face dark with restrained anger. If you walk out that door, you're making a choice. You're choosing to be outside this family. Permanently. Marina looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Small, sad, and utterly certain. I didn't choose that, Dad, she said softly. You did. Years ago. And she walked out. Marina got halfway to her car before she heard the door open behind her. Footsteps on gravel. Marina, wait! It was her mother. For the first time in years, Claire Kovacs was chasing after her daughter, and Marina realized, standing in the cold driveway under the estate's lights, this was the moment everything would either break or begin. Claire caught up to Marina in the driveway, breathless, her thin cardigan doing nothing against the cold. Please, Claire said, her voice cracking. Please don't go like this. Marina stopped but didn't turn around. Why not? Because they'll never forgive you. They never forgave me for existing, Mom. Silence. Marina finally turned to face her mother. In the harsh driveway lights, Claire looked older than her 53 years. Tired. Hollowed out. You knew, Marina said. It wasn't a question. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what to do. You could have said something. Anything. He's my husband, Marina. This is his family, his legacy. Claire's voice broke. I couldn't stop him. Marina felt something crack inside her chest. Not rage. Something worse. Pity. You could have tried, Marina said quietly. Just once you could have tried. Before Claire could respond, the front door opened again. This time it was Ethan. Mum, come back inside. His voice was sharp, authoritative. She's made her choice. Claire flinched, but didn't move. Ethan descended the steps, hands in his pockets, the portrait of casual power. He looked at Marina the way someone looks at an annoyance that refuses to go away. You know, I almost felt bad for you in there, Ethan said. Almost. But then I remembered, you did this to yourself. How? By being weak. By never fighting for your place. You think Dad respects people who just roll over? Ethan laughed. You could have been something, but you chose to be nothing. Marina met his eyes. Is that what you tell yourself? Ethan's smile faltered. That I chose this? Marina continued. That I chose to have my signature forged? That I chose to be written out of the will before I even knew what a will was? Ethan's expression went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. For a moment, something flickered across Ethan's face. Uncertainty. Fear. Then it was gone, replaced by cold certainty. You're talking crazy, he said, loud enough for Claire to hear. You see, Mum, this is what happens when people can't accept reality. They start making things up. Claire looked between them, confused, frightened. Marina felt the anger rise in her throat like bile. This was it. This was the moment she could expose everything. Right here, right now, in the driveway. But something stopped her. Not fear. Strategy. Because she realized, if she showed her hand now, they'd have time to prepare. Time to discredit her. Time to build their defense. But if she waited, if she let them think they'd won... You're right, Marina said, her voice suddenly flat, defeated. Ethan blinked. What? You're right. I'm being dramatic. I'm tired. I should go. She turned toward her car. Behind her, she heard Ethan's exhale of relief, heard Claire's confused silence. And as Marina unlocked her car door, she heard one more thing. Patricia's voice from the front steps calling out in false sympathy. Marina, darling, you're always welcome here. You know that, right? Family is family. Marina didn't respond. She got in her car, started the engine and drove away. And in the rearview mirror, she watched the estate lights grow smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. She made it 3 blocks before she had to pull over. Not because she was crying, because she was shaking with adrenaline so pure, so powerful, that her hands couldn't hold the steering wheel steady. She sat there in the dark, breathing slowly, forcing her mind to focus. The recording device in her bag had captured everything. Every word Thomas said about her not being capable. Every word Patricia said about her stepping aside. Every word Ethan said denying the forgery, which only mattered if he already knew about it. This wasn't just a family dinner. This was a legal confession, and they'd performed it for an audience. Marina pulled out her phone and called Angela. It was late, but Angela answered on the second ring. Tell me you got it, Angela said immediately. Every word. And? Marina smiled in the darkness of her car. They hung themselves. 3 days later, Marina walked into the offices of Whitmore and Associates, the same firm that had sent her the forged document years ago. She was carrying a folder. Inside was everything. The forged signature, the financial trails, the recorded dinner conversation, the email evidence, the testimony from the disbarred notary who'd agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. The receptionist looked up. Do you have an appointment? No, Marina said. But Thomas Kovacs does. Tell him his daughter is here to discuss the family trust. The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, Marina was escorted into a conference room, and sitting at the table, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits, was her father. He looked at her with the expression of a man who'd been inconvenienced. This better be quick, Thomas said. Marina set the folder on the table. It will be. She opened it, and everything changed. Thomas Kovacs didn't stand when Marina entered. Neither did the lawyers flanking him. One older, silver-haired, with the bored expression of someone who'd heard every threat before. The other younger, sharper, already sizing Marina up like prey. 5 minutes, Thomas said, checking his watch. I have another meeting. Marina pulled out the chair across from him and sat. She placed the folder on the table but didn't open it yet. Do you know what forensic accounting is, Dad? Thomas's jaw tightened at the word Dad. She never called him that, not in years. I don't have time for games, Marina. It's the practice of examining financial records to detect fraud, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. It's what I do for a living now. I'm actually very good at it. The older lawyer leaned forward. Ms. Kovacs, if you have a complaint regarding the family estate, there are proper channels. I know the channels. Marina's voice was calm, clinical. I've been using them. She opened the folder. The first page was a photocopy of the forged signature document, her relinquishment of rights from 5 years ago. She slid it across the table. This is the document that was filed with the state when I was 18, the one that removed me from the family trust. Thomas barely glanced at it. Yes. You signed it. No, Marina said. I didn't. The room went still. The younger lawyer frowned. Ms. Kovacs, if you're claiming... I'm not claiming anything. Marina placed the second document on the table, the handwriting analysis report. I'm presenting evidence. 3 independent analysts confirmed that the signature on that document is forged. The letter formation is wrong. The pressure points don't match. The stroke pattern is inconsistent with any legal document I've ever actually signed. Thomas's face remained impassive, but Marina saw it. The slight tightening around his eyes. The first crack. Furthermore, Marina continued, sliding over another page, the notary who allegedly witnessed my signature, a Michael Brennan, was disbarred 6 months after this document was filed, for fraud. He's currently cooperating with my legal team in exchange for a reduced sentence on unrelated charges. The older lawyer picked up the paper, scanned it, then looked at Thomas. Thomas said nothing. Marina placed the next document on the table, bank statements. These are transfers from your personal account to an offshore holding in the Cayman Islands. The transfers began 1 month after the forged document was filed and continued for 3 years. The amounts correspond almost exactly to the distributions I would have received as a trust beneficiary during that time. She looked directly at her father. You didn't just erase me from the trust. You took what was mine and hid it where you thought I'd never find it." The younger lawyer stood abruptly. "This is absurd. Mr. Kovacs, we don't have to sit here and—" "Sit down," Thomas said quietly. The lawyer sat. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. For the first time in Marina's life, she saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Calculation. The gears turning. The risk assessment of a man who'd just realized he'd miscalculated. "What do you want?" Thomas asked. Marina almost laughed. Of course, that would be his first question. Not denial, not defense, just negotiation. "I want what was always mine," Marina said. "My place in the trust, my inheritance, my name restored to every document you erased it from. And I want a formal admission that the signature was forged." The older lawyer shook his head immediately. "That's not going to happen. An admission like that opens Mr. Kovacs to criminal liability." "I know," Marina said. "That's the point." Thomas studied her for a long moment. "You've been planning this," he said slowly. "For years." "Yes. You let us think you were weak, passive, forgettable." "Yes. And all that time you were gathering evidence." Marina didn't blink. "Yes." Thomas leaned back, something like respect crossing his face, before it hardened again into cold pragmatism. "If I don't agree to your terms—" Marina placed the final document on the table, a legal filing already prepared, ready to be submitted to the court. "Then I go public. I file a lawsuit. I provide all of this evidence to the district attorney's office, and I make sure every business partner, every client, every person who's ever trusted the Kovacs name knows exactly what kind of family they've been dealing with." She met her father's eyes. "I'll burn it all down, Dad. Every bit of the legacy you care about more than your own daughter." Silence. The lawyers exchanged glances. Thomas stared at the documents spread across the table like a losing hand of cards. Finally, he spoke. "You'd destroy the family." "No," Marina said softly. "You already did that. I'm just making sure everyone knows." Thomas Kovacs made his decision in the time it took him to breathe in and out once. "Give us 48 hours, he said. Marina stood. "You have 24. She walked out of the conference room, leaving the folder behind, leaving them with the evidence they couldn't deny, leaving them with the truth they'd spent years trying to bury. And as the door closed behind her, Marina heard something she'd never heard before. Her father's voice shaking just slightly, saying to his lawyers, "Fix this. Now." But some things, Marina knew, couldn't be fixed. They could only be faced. Marina didn't go home. She drove to Angela Reyes's office, walked in without calling ahead, and said 5 words. "They're going to fight back." Angela looked up from her desk, saw Marina's expression, and immediately cleared her schedule. 20 minutes later, they were in Angela's conference room, door locked, with Marina's evidence spread across the table like a battle plan. "Tell me what happened," Angela said. Marina recounted the meeting, every word, every reaction. When she finished, Angela was quiet for a long moment. "They'll try to settle," she said finally. "Quietly. They'll offer you money, a revised trust position, maybe even an apology, off the record, but they won't admit to the forgery publicly. That's criminal exposure they can't afford." "I know. So what do you want to do?" Marina thought about the dinner, about her mother's silence, about Ethan's smirk, about Patricia's false warmth and her father's cold dismissal. "I want them to admit what they did," Marina said. "In writing, on record. I want it filed with the court so it can never be erased." Angela nodded slowly. "That's the nuclear option. If you do that, there's no going back. No reconciliation. No quiet family dinners where everyone pretends nothing happened." "There was never going to be that anyway," Marina said. "True." Angela leaned forward. "But Marina, I need you to understand something. If you push this to trial, they're going to come after you. Personally, they'll try to paint you as vindictive, unstable, a liar. They'll dig into your life looking for anything they can use. And they have resources you don't. Let them try." Angela studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Okay. Then let's make sure we're ready." Over the next 24 hours, Marina did 3 things. First, she filed the lawsuit with the civil court, formally alleging fraud, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. Second, she sent copies of all evidence to the district attorney's office with a formal complaint requesting a criminal investigation. Third, she called her mother. Claire answered on the 5th ring. "Marina." Her voice was small, hesitant. "Hi, Mom. Your father is furious. He says you're trying to destroy the family. He says—" Claire's voice cracked. "He says I'm not allowed to talk to you." Marina closed her eyes. Are you going to listen to him? Silence. Then, quietly, I don't know. Mom, I need you to understand something. This isn't about hurting anyone. This is about the truth. They forged my signature. They stole from me. And they did it because they thought I'd never fight back. But why now? Claire's voice rose, desperate. Why not just let it go? You have your own life. Why drag all of this up? Because if I don't, who's next? Marina said. You? The next daughter born into this family who doesn't fit their mold. How many people do we let them erase before someone says enough? Claire was crying now. Marina could hear it in her breathing. I can't lose him, Claire whispered. You already did, Mom. You just haven't admitted it yet. Marina hung up. The response from Thomas's legal team came at 11:47 p.m. the same night. A formal counterclaim, alleging that Marina was engaged in extortion, defamation, and filing a frivolous lawsuit with the intent to harm the family's business interests. They were also requesting an emergency hearing to have her claims dismissed. Angela read it, shook her head, and laughed. They're panicking, she said. Good. No, Marina. This is better than good. This counterclaim is full of holes. They're making legal arguments that don't apply. They're claiming things they can't prove. This is the filing of lawyers who are scared. So what do we do? Angela smiled. We let them keep talking. Every motion they file, every argument they make, gives us more to work with. They're burying themselves. 2 weeks later, the emergency hearing took place. Marina sat at the plaintiff's table with Angela, hands folded, expression neutral. Across the aisle, Thomas sat with his team of 4 lawyers, looking every bit the powerful patriarch who'd been unjustly accused. The judge, a woman in her 60s named the Honorable Patricia Chen, reviewed the filings in silence. Then she looked up. Mr. Brenner, she said to Thomas's lead attorney, your motion to dismiss claims that Ms. Kovach's allegations are unsubstantiated, but I'm looking at a handwriting analysis from 3 independent experts, bank records, and a sworn statement from the notary involved. That doesn't strike me as unsubstantiated. Brenner stood. Your Honor, Ms. Kovach is clearly engaged in a vendetta against her family. Counsel, Judge Chen interrupted. I'm not interested in your characterization of her motives. I'm interested in whether she has a legitimate legal claim, and from what I'm seeing, she does. She set down the papers. Motion to dismiss is denied. We're moving forward with discovery. Mr. Kovach, I'm ordering you and your representatives to produce all documents related to the family trust, all correspondence regarding Ms. Kovach's removal from said trust, and all financial records for the offshore accounts in question. Brenner's face went pale. Your Honor, that's overly broad. No, Judge Chen said flatly. That's appropriate. You have 30 days. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. Marina walked out of the courtroom with Angela at her side. Behind them, she could hear Thomas's lawyers already arguing in heated whispers. That was fast, Marina said. That, Angela said, grinning, was a judge who knows exactly what she's looking at. They're going to have to turn over everything now. And if there's more dirt in those files, and I guarantee there is, they just handed it to us. Marina stopped on the courthouse steps, turned and looked back at the building. Somewhere inside, her father was realizing he'd lost control, and for the first time in her life, Marina wasn't afraid of what came next. The call came 3 days later. Marina was at work when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. Marina. It was Patricia. Her voice was different now. No false warmth, no performance, just fear. We need to talk, Patricia said. About? A settlement. Before this gets worse. Marina smiled. It's already worse, she said, and hung up. The settlement offer arrived by courier the next morning. Marina opened it at her kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside her. The terms were generous. Full restoration of her position in the trust, a lump sum payment of $2.3 million as back distributions she would have received over the past 5 years, a formal letter of apology from Thomas Kovach, though notably not admitting to forgery, just regret over misunderstandings. And one more thing, a non-disclosure agreement. She could have the money, the position, the apology, but she could never speak publicly about what happened. Marina read it twice. Then she called Angela. They're offering me silence, Marina said. I saw it's a good offer financially. But it's not what you wanted. You wanted the truth on record. This buries it. Marina stared at the papers. $2.3 million would change her life. She could pay off student loans, buy a house, never worry about money again. But it would also mean letting them win in the way that mattered most. controlling the narrative. "What do you think I should do?" Marina asked. Angela was quiet for a moment. "I think you need to ask yourself what you're actually fighting for. Justice or peace, because sometimes you can't have both." Marina spent the rest of the day thinking. She thought about the girl she'd been at 18, signing a document she didn't understand, trusting that family meant something. She thought about the woman she'd become, who learned that trust was a weapon people used against you. She thought about her mother, trapped in a marriage to a man who valued control over love. And she thought about every person who would come after her, who might face the same choice: stay silent and survive, or speak up and risk everything. That evening, Marina wrote her response. Not to the lawyers, to her father. "Thomas, I received your offer. It's generous. It's more than I expected, and it's exactly what I thought you would do. Try to buy silence instead of offer truth. I don't want your money. I never did. I wanted you to admit what you did. I wanted you to face the fact that you erased your own daughter because it was convenient. I wanted you to understand that power doesn't make you right. It just makes you dangerous. But I realize now that you'll never understand that, because understanding would require something you don't have: the ability to see people as more than assets to be managed. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm rejecting your settlement. I'm moving forward with the lawsuit. And when we get to trial, I'm going to present every piece of evidence I have, not because I want to destroy you, but because the truth deserves to exist somewhere other than my silence. You taught me that family is about legacy. You were right. I'm just making sure that legacy is honest. Marina." She sent it, and then she waited. The response came faster than she expected. Not from her father, from Ethan. He showed up at her apartment at 9 p.m. unannounced, looking disheveled in a way Marina had never seen. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red. "You're really going to do this?" he said when she opened the door. "Yes. You're going to drag us through court, make everything public, humiliate the family." "I'm going to tell the truth," Marina corrected. "If that humiliates you, that's your fault, not mine." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You really think you're the hero here, don't you?" "No," Marina said quietly. "I think I'm the person who got tired of being erased." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, looked away, looked back. "He's my father too," he said finally. "And yeah, he's cold, and he's controlling, and he's impossible. But he's still my father. Don't I get any say in this?" Marina felt something shift in her chest. Not sympathy, but recognition. "You had a say, Ethan. Every time you stayed silent when he treated me like I didn't matter. Every time you benefited from my erasure. You chose your side. I was protecting the family." "No," Marina said. "You were protecting yourself." Ethan's face hardened. "Fine. Then let me be clear. If you go through with this, you're not just going after Dad. You're going after all of us, and we will fight you with everything we have." "I know," Marina said, "and I'll still win." She closed the door. The trial was set for 3 months later. In that time, Marina's life became a strange kind of limbo. She went to work, came home, reviewed evidence with Angela, tried to sleep. Her mother called once late at night, crying. Marina answered but said nothing, just listened to Claire's broken apologies until the line went quiet. Patricia sent a handwritten letter begging Marina to reconsider, claiming that family should forgive. Richard showed up at her office, offering to testify on her behalf if she'd agree to a private settlement. Marina refused them all, because she'd realized something in the months of waiting. This was never about winning or losing. It was about refusing to disappear. Every person who'd tried to erase her, every signature forged, every lie told, they'd all counted on her silence. And the moment she stopped being silent, everything changed. Not because she was powerful, but because the truth was. The trial lasted 6 days. On the morning of the verdict, Marina sat in the courtroom and thought about the girl she used to be. The one who believed that if she was just quiet enough, small enough, invisible enough, maybe someone would finally see her. She didn't believe that anymore. And when the judge read the verdict, ruling in Marina's favor on all counts, ordering full restitution and a formal admission of forgery, Marina didn't cry, didn't celebrate. She just stood, collected her things and walked out of the courtroom into the sunlight. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 6 months after the trial, Marina stood in her new apartment. It wasn't extravagant, wasn't the kind of place that screamed wealth or status, but it was hers, fully hers, paid for with money that had always belonged to her, finally returned. The trial had ended exactly as Angela predicted, with the truth on record, the forgery admitted, and Thomas Kovacs facing consequences he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. The business took a hit. Clients distanced themselves. The family name, once synonymous with success, now carried whispers of fraud. Ethan was forced to step down from several boards. Patricia and Richard quietly moved out of state. And Claire filed for divorce. It was the last thing Marina expected. But 3 weeks after the verdict, her mother called. "I'm leaving him," Claire said, her voice stronger than Marina had heard in years. "I should have done it a long time ago." "What changed?" Marina asked. "You did." Claire's voice cracked. "You showed me what it looks like to stop accepting less than you deserve." They met for coffee the following week. It was awkward, painful, full of things that couldn't be unsaid, but it was a beginning. Marina didn't speak to her father after the trial, didn't send letters, didn't seek reconciliation. She simply let him live with what he'd done. And that, she realized, was the most powerful thing she could have done. Because Thomas Kovacs was a man who needed to be right, who needed control, who needed to believe he was the patriarch of something worth protecting. And now, that illusion was gone. The family he'd tried to protect had fractured. The legacy he'd tried to preserve was tainted. And the daughter he'd tried to erase had become the one person he couldn't forget. One afternoon, Marina received an email from a woman named Sophia. "Hi, Marina. You don't know me, but I read about your case in the news. I'm dealing with something similar with my own family. I won't go into details, but seeing what you did gave me the courage to finally speak up. I just wanted to say thank you for not staying silent, for showing people like me that we don't have to accept being erased." Marina read the email 3 times. Then she saved it in a folder she titled, "Why It Mattered." Over the following months, more emails came. From daughters, from sisters, from people who'd been told they were too much or not enough, or simply in the way. Marina answered each one the same way. You don't need anyone's permission to exist. A year after the trial, Marina was offered a position at a non-profit that helped victims of financial abuse within families. She accepted. The work was hard. The stories were heavy. But for the first time in her life, Marina felt like she was doing something that mattered beyond her own survival. She was helping others find their voice, helping them gather evidence, helping them understand that silence wasn't strength. It was just another form of erasure. One evening, as Marina was locking up the office, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Marina." It was her father. His voice was different, quieter, older. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Thomas said. "I don't even expect you to listen. But I needed to say this once. You were right." Marina said nothing. "I told myself I was protecting the family, building something that would last. But I was just protecting myself, and I hurt you badly. I know that now." Silence stretched between them. "I'm dying, Marina. Cancer. Stage 4. I have a few months, maybe less." Marina felt something twist in her chest. Not grief, not exactly. Something more complicated. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said finally. "I don't want your pity," Thomas said. I don't know what I want. Maybe just to hear your voice, to know that you're okay." "I am okay," Marina said. "Good." Thomas's voice cracked. "That's, good." Another pause. "Marina." "Yes, you're stronger than I ever was. I don't know if I ever told you that." "You didn't." "Well, you are." And he hung up. Marina stood in the parking lot, phone still in her hand, staring at the darkening sky. She thought about forgiveness, about whether it was something you gave to others or something you gave to yourself. She thought about the girl who'd sat silently at family dinners, absorbing every dismissal, every comparison, every casual cruelty. And she thought about the woman she'd become, who learned that the opposite of silence wasn't noise, it was truth. Thomas Kovacs died 3 months later. Marina didn't attend the funeral, but she sent flowers, white lilies, and a card that said simply, "You were my father. That will never change." But I had to become myself anyway. Years later, when people asked Marina about the trial, about the family, about everything she'd been through, she always gave the same answer. "I didn't win because I was louder than them. I won because I stopped waiting for permission to exist." And sometimes, late at night, when Marina was alone in her apartment, she'd pull out that old journal she'd kept as a child, the one full of dates and conversations and witnessed truths. She'd read through the pages, evidence of a girl who understood even then that memory was survival. And she'd add one more entry. "I exist, fully, honestly, without apology, and that is enough. If you've stayed until the end of this story, thank you. Marina's story is fiction, but the emotions behind it are real. Somewhere right now someone is being told they don't matter, that their voice doesn't count, that they should stay quiet and accept less than they deserve. If that person is you, hear this. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need permission to stand up for yourself. And you don't need anyone's validation to know your worth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. She never needed to scream, the truth was loud enough,